Started now. We still have a few people joining, but I want to honor your time for the evening. I want to welcome all of you to this open house regarding the Arapahoe County Water Study. My name's Larry Mugler. I'm a planner on the staff at the county and one of the co-managers for the water study project. The county's been concerned about water for over 20 years. In our 2001 comprehensive plan, we undertook a study for water supply in the eastern part of the county. And in our 2018 update to the comprehensive plan, we expanded on our policies and strategies regarding water and recognized the need to update that 2001 study. The study had a forecast year of 2020, and it was pretty well at that limit. At the same time, the state was adopting the Colorado Water Plan that anticipated the needs for the state and recognized that a major gap was going to exist between the water demand in the South Platte watershed and the amount of water that the water providers in that watershed anticipated to have available. And that includes Arapahoe County in the South Platte watershed. After some discussions with water providers and other stakeholders, the county applied for planning grants from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and they're the group that managed the Colorado Water Plan. We were awarded grants from those, and those were focused on an update of that part of the study that looked at the eastern part of the county. Our Board of County Commissioners wanted to extend the study to cover the entire county and provided some additional funding from their federal pandemic grants to give us a full total budget. With that, we selected a consultant team in late 2020, and they got underway in late 2022. So we're now more than halfway through our 18-month project. Tonight's an opportunity for residents of Arapahoe County to hear about the initial findings of the study and to provide input on the remaining phases of the work. I will turn the presentation over to Ann Kuchenmeister from the consultant team to describe how you can directly participate in tonight's open house. Ann?
Great. Thank you, Larry, and welcome everyone. Tonight we do have a polling platform that we're going to be using to ask some questions. There's 3 ways to join this. However you choose to join it, your options will be the same. You can scan that QR code with your phone, and it'll bring you to a site to provide input. You can go to the website listed here, which I'm going to put in the chat as well. Or you can join by text message, and you send a text message to I think we're getting some feedback from someone who just joined. We're watching a lovely program.
So that he can make it his chief campaign issue. It is quite clear that election rigging lies have taken their toll when it comes to the faith that Colorado.
For those joining us tonight, if you are not one of the presenters, could you please make sure?
All right. So, no problem. Couldn't figure out who it was. So we have 3 ways to join. Again, so they scan the QR code. You can go to the website, which is also in the chat, and you can copy and paste it from there, or you can join via text message. So sending a text message, as you see in the screen, the icon there with the phone, the number is 22333, and the text you send is MBI poll 243. You don't need to do anything with the response text you get. You are all set. You don't need to click the link. There's no question yet. I'll give you a moment to select your way that you would like to get in. If this technology is not for you, no problem. You can also respond by just adding to the chat and sending your input that way as well. Right, so I'm going to move to the next slide. These instructions will also be at the top of the screen for each of the input opportunities. The first question is, what is your connection to water in Arapahoe County? And for this one, you can choose all that apply. See some input is already coming in. Again, those instructions are at the top of the screen, so if you weren't quite able to get them on that first slide, QR code is available. web link, or text message. You only need to choose one way of getting to us. Good, and I see some people are also using the chat to note that they're a resident. Thank you, Kathy. We'll take input however you want to provide it to us. Water providers joining, business owners, a farmer joining, that's great. Property owners. And the majority of our participants tonight also identifying as residents. Great, well, we're gonna have several opportunities to provide input using this platform throughout the night, or again, you're welcome to use the chat, and we'll also have opportunities for questions and discussion at a later point in the meeting. So hold on to those until we get to a couple stoppage points in the presentation, and then we welcome your input that way as well. That we'll go to the next slide.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Hi, I'm Will Koger with Forsgren Associates, and tonight I wanted to go through the agenda with you. We were covering the welcome and team introductions. We'll give you an overview of the water supply study and talk about the public engagement summary as well. We'd like to give you some context about Colorado water issues in general, and then we'll talk specifically about supplies for Arapahoe County. And then this is all geared toward identifying what the water demands are projected to be through 2050 and how we can match that up with supplies. So, and we'll also talk about strategies, give an overview of the strategies that will allow for extending the use of the water supplies that we have. Okay, go to the next slide here. So by way of introduction, this is our team. Larry Mugler, who you met earlier, is a planner project specialist with Arapahoe County. Loretta Daniel is the long-range planning program manager, also with Arapahoe County. Larry and Loretta are co-project managers for the water supply study. Jason Reynolds heads up the planning division for Arapahoe County and oversees the work. And I'm Will Koger with Forsgren Associates, the project manager for the consulting team. We have Ann Kuchenmeister, who is with Michael Baker International, and Ted Hyde, also with Michael Baker. And Michael Baker International is responsible for the planning aspects of our work, along with the public outreach and engagement. We also have tonight Mr. Bill Franzak. You may not recognize Bill from this picture because he has quite a beard now, but Bill is with he is a water resources specialist with the firm LRE Water. So we'd like to get a little more feedback from you at this point. And the question we have for you is, what one word best describes Arapahoe County's water supply today? Again, what one word best describes Arapahoe County's water supply today? And there are directions on how to join this poll at the top of the page if you are just now joining us. Okay, we give this a little bit more time here, get some more feedback. We've got 3 entries here. Okay, interesting responses. Okay, I'm seeing limited, quality, and lacking are the larger terms here. So, okay, limited, polluted, quality, lacking. Okay, it looks like there is certainly some interest and maybe some questions or comments regarding water supplies in Arapahoe County. Okay, that's interesting feedback. Thank you for participating in that. So yes, those are all things that we think about with regard to water. And these days there are the headlines certainly make there's certainly a lot of headlines regarding water quality and whether it's drinkable and that type of thing. But we have a very good group of water providers across the county that that make sure water is in good shape for drinking. But yes, thank you. Good input for that. Okay, we'll go to the next slide here.
So this one is a similar question, but looking ahead to 2050.
Oh, yes. Okay, got it. Okay, what one word best describes Arapahoe County's water supply in 2050? As you look down the road, 25 years out, 26 years out, what can we expect for Arapahoe County's water supply? Unknown, that's a good one. Clean, okay. Okay, unknown is that's a good one word answer for sure. And the others here, shortage, uncertain, concerning, lower, depleted. And you're right, those are all things that we think about when we look down the road at 2050. And so our charge with the water supply study is to review the water supply demands projected through 2050 and to look and see and make sure that the supply picture matches up with the demands. And there are a number of ways that we will look at that, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. Okay, well, the main purpose for the study, and this is one across the state, is that the Colorado Water Plan has identified a need to match up land use planning with water supply planning. And so that's really our charge, is to plan for current and future water needs by assessing the water supplies and demands up through the year 2050. Now you may wonder, well, what's so special about 2050? One is that it matches up with the same planning horizon as in Colorado's water plan. It also is, when we look at the next 25 years, that's a pretty good window of time to be looking at. And beyond that, it's really difficult to look at 25 years plus down the road. But the next 25 years, we've got a much better handle on what we can expect over the next 25 years, 26 years. So with this, we want to be able to identify any areas of the county that may have some potential shortages. And then we also want to see how we can match up supplies with those areas of potential shortage. We also want to be focused on how we can use water much more efficiently in the years ahead. And we've made tremendous strides over the last 25 years in water efficiency and conservation. But we want to look ahead, and there's much more technology and much more of a focus on water conservation and efficiency in the years ahead. We also want to be able to engage residents to better understand the needs and concerns about water supply. And ultimately, we're going to complete a full written study that looks to balance supplies and demands. Okay, with regard to our outreach and engagement, we had produced a number of flyers about the water supply study that were posted at locations around the county. We have a project webpage, and that there's a link through the Arapahoe County website to get to that webpage. And we're also going to be talking about MetroQuest, which is a very interactive user-friendly program to obtain information from you all online, and it will help us very much to get your feedback on different issues as you work through that. So it's a pretty neat program to try out. We also recognize this is the first of two public meetings. We have one today, and we'll schedule the one, it looks like in the March timeframe, but we'll ask you to stay tuned and we'll have more details on that as we get closer. We also have notifications and updates by social media and other outlets So this is really a pretty comprehensive outreach and engagement program, because certainly public outreach is a very important part of this. Okay, we're going to start by giving some background information regarding Colorado water in general. We'll talk about Colorado's divide between the West Slope and the Front Range, what our growing water demands look like, particularly for Arapahoe County, and what water supplies do we have available to us. One water supply that is very important to the county, in the county, a large part of the county, is Denver Basin groundwater. So we'll talk more about that. First, with regard to Colorado's divide, this is a very interesting map. It's prepared from the Division of Water Resources, and it's called a snake diagram. The thickness of these different blue ribbons shows the relative flow each year in each of our major river basins. And you can see, obviously looking at this, that much more flow occurs on the west side of our state, as about 80% of the water is on the west side and the west slope, but 80% of our population is on the Front Range, primarily the I-25 corridor from Fort Collins down to Pueblo and Trinidad. We've got a lot of population on the Front Range that requires bringing much water from the west slope. And so that occurs through what are called trans-mountain diversions, bringing water to the Front Range, as the South Platte and Arkansas River are fully used and fully appropriated. So we've got to bring water from the west slope to sustain our population. And so looking ahead at our growing water demands, in 2020, Colorado's population was right about 5.8 million people. By 2050, that's projected to grow to 7.5 million by the State Demographer's Office. Arapahoe County, more specifically, had a population of about 655,000 in 2020, and 30 years later, projected for 2050, we're looking at a range of 900,000 to 960,000. Now, a little bit about that range. We know there are a number of factors that will go into what our water demand is going to be, and those factors can include climate change, economic growth, population growth, whether there's people moving in and moving out of the state, a lot of different factors that go into that. So what we've done is we've rolled all of those considerations into the 900 to 960,000 population estimate that will function really as bookends for us. And we'll use those numbers to identify what water demands we can project for 2050. And that will give us a range of water demands that we'd expect for 2050. So a couple of areas of water supplies with regard to their importance in Arapahoe County. We do have surface waters. We know they are prone to drought. That's our rivers and streams that are prone to drought when there's drier climate conditions. We know that there's less flow in those rivers and streams. And as I mentioned, we bring a lot of the water we have from the west slope, and about half the water in the Denver metro area and along the Front Range is actually provided from the west slope from those trans-mountain diversions that I mentioned. Groundwater, there's alluvial groundwater that's connected to the surface streams, and there are also some designated basins that are some water-bearing basins, but those are over-appropriated. In other words, they're fully prescribed, fully used, and so there is not a lot of additional supply, or no remaining additional supply that is unspoken for in those basins and with alluvial groundwater. So that leaves us with the Denver Basin groundwater. Denver Basin groundwater is an extensive, very good supply source for much of the Denver metro area. And it's a good supply, and it's drought proof. So that's the positive on Denver Basin groundwater. But the water in there, some of it dates back to the Ice Age. And we know that the water is being used more quickly than it gets replenished. So it is diminishing over time. But there is still a lot of water there. And our charge is to look at how we can use it efficiently and extend the use of those aquifers. So we have another poll question for you. Again, if you're joining us late, there are instructions at the top of the page on how to join this poll, and we would invite you to do that. So the question this time is, how is water provided to you? A public water system, B, individual well, or C, unsure. How is water provided to you? Public water system, individual well, or unsure? Okay, give it just a second here. Okay, so it looks like about 3/4 of the folks joining us tonight are served by a public water system. That's great. And individual wells are more in the rural areas typically. Okay. So now let's talk specifically about the Denver Basin, and this is a very important water supply for Arapahoe County. You can see Arapahoe County kind of toward the center of this, and I don't know if you can use your cursor to kind of point out Arapahoe County there. It goes from cuts right across the center of the Denver Basin. The Denver Basin is huge. The size of the Denver Basin is roughly the size of Connecticut when you look at it in plan view here. And it is often compared to a stack of bowls that are stacked on top of each other. And this shows that's what's represented by the different colors here are the different aquifers as you go from top to bottom. Here are a couple of profiles of the Denver Basin aquifers. The one at the top goes from west to east, and you can see the Denver skyline over there toward the west. Both of these profiles are centered on the town of Watkins. And this shows what those formations, those aquifers, look like as they go from west over to feathering out toward the east. And then the lower profile is from south to north. And you can see the skyline of Colorado Springs close to the south and the skyline of Greeley close to the northern end. And so this is a very large aquifer system. The vertical axis on both of these profiles, though, is greatly exaggerated. And so even though these aquifers can be a couple thousand feet deep, that vertical dimension is much smaller with respect to the length and the width of the aquifers than what this is representing. And as we're all familiar as we go through I-70, you drive I-70 up to the mountains, and you go through the hogback right there at the Morrison exit. There you actually see the upturned bedrock, and that is the edges of the aquifers are in that upturned area. So it's you can look right there and see these different geology formations that make up the aquifers of the Denver Basin. And it's easy to think of the Denver Basin groundwater as of this vast reservoir underneath our feet, and it is a very important and extensive resource. But this gives you a little bit better sense for what it takes to develop water from these aquifers. For one, for your property, if you do have rights in the Denver Basin groundwater to Denver Basin groundwater, you are not able to drill one well to more than one aquifer. If you have 2 or 3 aquifers under your property, then you have to drill 2 or 3 wells to access that water. Also, much of the underlying areas is rock and clay, areas of the geological layers that are not storing water. It's really those pockets of sand and gravel that are storing the water, and that's where the screens of the well are placed so that you can produce water from those areas. So this gives you an idea of these pockets of sand and gravel throughout each of the aquifers. And so it is a vast resource, but you have to be very specific with where you're drawing water from underneath in the aquifers below. So that brings us now to water supply, and we're going to ask Bill Franzak to cover this portion with us. Thanks. Bill?
Real quick before we transition, in the chat, Bonnie had a question. Is the Dawson Aquifer considered a source as well? There were concerns about contamination.
Thank you, Will. I can answer that quick question right now. In Arapahoe County, the Dawson Aquifer really is non-existent. There's a little Arapahoe, or I'm sorry, a little Dawson groundwater in the south and west part of the county, primarily in the southern Denver metro region, but really there's no Dawson Aquifer water as you head through the bulk of the county, which is about probably 70% of the county does not have Dawson water. But thank you, Will. I'll walk through the water supply side of things, the water demand. We were charged with taking a look at what is the water that's available in Arapahoe County. And so what we've done is we've broken the county up into regions. I will talk about renewable and non-renewable supply. What I mean by renewable is what Will indicated earlier, is supplies of water that are directly related to rainfall, snow melt, this type of thing, where rain falls and it fills up aquifers, fills up rivers. So it's renewable year after year. Non-renewable is like the Denver Basin aquifer, whereas there's really no recharge from snow melt or from rainfall. And so it's a source that is depleted over time. And then I'll talk about where we focused on groundwater, which is in our, you'll see very shortly here, Region 2. So as we looked at the county, and we saw that in the Denver Basin map that we'll put up as well, the county spreads across the Denver Basin as well as 2 designated groundwater basins. The designated groundwater basin in the green is the Lost Creek designated groundwater basin, and the designated basin in the red is the Kiowa Bijou designated groundwater basin. The reason we chose to break up the county into 3 regions to analyze the water supply is Region 1 is primarily very urbanized. It is Denver, Aurora, Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Authority, East Cherry Creek Valley, Inverness, these types of water suppliers that, in a heavily urbanized area, as well as most of the water that is in Region 1 is surface water that comes in from either the West Slope, as well as Will mentioned, or the South Platte itself, the river, the South Platte River. There's pipelines that bring water in from the Brighton area down into Region 1, as well as numerous water assets that come in from the West Slope. Denver Basin groundwater in Region 1 really is not used very often. It is also controlled by the municipalities, just based upon their overlying service areas. And right now, the Denver Basin aquifers in Region 1 are primarily used for drought contingency, and there are studies being done for aquifer storage and recovery. In Region 2 is where we focused on really the groundwater use, because that is a mix between rural and urban. There are some urban centers being Bennett, Byers, Strasburg, and Deer Trail, but primarily in Region 2, it's unincorporated Arapahoe County, and the water for Region 2 is primarily Denver Basin groundwater. There is some alluvial groundwater in Region 2, but primarily that's designated groundwater that is associated with either Lost Creek, Kiowa Creek, or Bijou Creek. And those, both those basins are over appropriated for that type of groundwater. So any new use would not be authorized by the state or the Division of Water Resources without having some sort of replacement plan. Then there's Region 3, and Region 3 is really the eastern part of the county, which is associated with the county's Tier 3 designation. And it's really east of Deer Trail, primarily agriculture. The county is anticipating that's going to stay as an agricultural area, and the water resources out in Region 3 are fairly limited. You're getting to the extent of the Denver Basin aquifers, and there's not a lot of surface streams or alluvial groundwater. It's very sparse. This is a blow up of Region 1. And this, as you can see, it's these different colors, and I do apologize for the purple on the east side of, or the right side of the map. There are 2 water providers there. There's Aurora, and then there's Rangeview. But you can see that in Region 1, it is heavily dominated by water providers who have very extensive water assets, water management plans, water conservation plans, whether it be Denver Water, Aurora Water, East Cherry Creek Valley, or Rangeview. There's a lot of folks that are involved with that, working on water supply to ensure that there's a sustainable and reliable supply. Again, in this area, Denver Basin groundwater is not the primary use of water. It's primarily surface water or renewable water resources. This is Region 2, as I previously discussed. This is unincorporated Arapahoe County, and the 4 entities that are issued I already mentioned, which was Bennett, Strasburg, Byers, and Deer Trail. Those are each municipalities that do provide water to their residents. This is also the area where the county is concerned about potential future development along the I-70 corridor and also in the rural area, and how groundwater, which is primarily Denver Basin groundwater, will be allocated and administered to ensure there's a sustainable supply. This is where we really focused on the groundwater analysis. And again, because Region 1, the Denver Basin groundwater, is primarily appropriated such that it is managed and basically, like a better word, owned through deemed consent by the individual landowners or individual water providers, and that the bulk of the water underlying Region 2 is individual property owners and other property owners. And then Region 3, there's really no water. So when we focused on the groundwater study, it was to take a look at what is the groundwater supply in Region 2. And that really is focusing again on the Denver Basin groundwater. And I just saw something pop up of a clarification. Yes, there really is no Dawson aquifer water in Arapahoe County, except in the Region 1. And a lot of that Dawson water is controlled by the individual municipalities, being Denver, Aurora, or so forth. There are some communities within Region 1 that are on well water in the Dawson, but there's not a significant number of those.
And also, I think they're wondering if that water's part of the study. It sounds like it's not a major contributing factor to that.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just one second. It is part of the study, but it is not a major part of it. So as we looked at the groundwater study, we really again are focused on Region 2. And again, that's where the major groundwater use is going to be used within the county presently. We compiled the groundwater data in that area from the Colorado Division of Water Resources. We modeled the physical availability of the Denver Basin groundwater, and we did this through review of geophysical logs and lithological logs. And then that modeling showed that the physical availability of Denver Basin groundwater is typically less than the state allocations. The state allocates Denver Basin groundwater based upon land ownership, overlying land, the acreage, and the saturated thickness or the thickness of the aquifer. And then they allocate that over 100 years. The modeling that we put together shows that while that water is legally there from the state, those aquifers typically do not release from a physical standpoint that amount of water as you would see from the state allocations. It's typically less. Here is basically the results of our groundwater study. So to answer the question that was in the chat, there is some Dawson aquifer water, but you can see it's very, very limited. There's not much in the county whatsoever. As we look at the Denver aquifer, you got the Denver, the Upper Arapahoe, Lower Arapahoe, because the Upper Arapahoe and the Lower Arapahoe are divided in parts of the county. And then you have the Laramie Fox Hills. These are 4 distinct aquifers in the Denver Basin. The Denver aquifer, there is water available. It looks like, there's roughly 20,000 acre feet of water, but that water really is not usable. And the reason that is because withdrawal of the Denver water Denver aquifer water, will impact the overlying over-appropriated alluvial water or the surface streams. And therefore, to access that water or to develop that water, you need to have an augmentation plan or a replacement plan. The upper Arapahoe water, there is water available for appropriation as well. That's the one just below the Denver. And the bulk of that water is available for appropriation. There's only a small portion of that water that would require some sort of augmentation. There's very limited water in the lower Arapahoe aquifer. It's primarily, there's just a few, it's just not a very productive aquifer. And then the Larry Fox Hill is the deepest. There is quite a bit of water still available for appropriation.
And Bill, just a comment, when we talk about physical availability, we're talking about under current technologies, that's what can be produced, but certainly there's more progress on technology making for greater production possibly down the road.
That's correct. Under current drilling techniques and technology to put wells in, that's the physical availability is less than what the state actually allocates. However, as exactly as you indicated, Will, that as technology advances, there are opportunities of people looking at how more water can be released out of these aquifers in the future.
Answer a couple questions from the chat. We have a few minutes now if anybody had a question about that section before I move on, and there will be more time at the end as well if you wanted to wait. All right, hearing nothing, I think we can carry on.
So next we're going to look at what the water demands are, kind of, and the way we've done that is use the population estimates that have been provided by the county using state demographer data to look at how population is expected to grow. And then we evaluated the supply as well, how that demand is calculated. So water demands up through 2050. We looked again at the total estimates of household and commercial growth as provided for each water provider and municipality, including unincorporated areas of Arapahoe County as estimated by the state demographer. We then looked at some of the major water providers in the areas, in the county, Denver Water, Aurora Water, ECCV, Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater, Rangeview, to really look at, kind of what is the percentage of estimates, how is water used within each one of these entities. And it was fairly consistent across all the different water providers that single-family dwellings are roughly 45% of the water use in a municipality. Single-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, 25%. Commercial/industrial use is 21%, and then outside irrigation of parks, open space, medians, this type of thing was 8 to 9%. Within each of the categories above, excluding obviously the outside irrigation, which is 8 to 9%, irrigation use is approximately 30 to 50% of the water use in each one of those categories. And this information was pulled and compiled from these water efficiency plans, water management plans from all the different water providers that we researched. What are some of the key takeaways from our water analysis? The water supplies in Region 1 are diverse. They are primarily renewable, and there's limited reliance on Denver Basin groundwater. The water supplies in Region 2 are primarily Denver Basin groundwater, currently and in the future. There is significant deeper Denver Basin groundwater for Region 2 for future development. That also comes with a cost. And then that as we've looked at that, there's moderate water demand growth throughout the county. We see 19 to 54% water growth in Region 1. Aurora is being the largest growth of water based upon demographer data and just ability to grow. Region 2, the water providers, that means the Byers, the Bennett's, the Strasburgs, and the Deer Trails, are not expected to have high population growth, so there's not a lot of water growth in those areas. The unincorporated areas of the county, and again, there is unincorporated areas in Region 1 as well, but the unincorporated areas of the county are expected to have about 137% water growth. And that's just due to subdivisions and other types of development that are anticipated to be coming in to the county through 2050. And the largest water growth will be in Prosper Farms and Sky Ranch, and that's just primarily because they're in the very early stages of the development of those two developments.
And Bill, for that's specifically growth as a percentage, right? For those Prosper Farm and Sky Ranch.
Correct.
Okay.
The last slide I'll talk through here is water efficiency, and these are some of the things that we are looking at to kind of see how we can expand the water molecule going forward. A couple of small photographs that you see down in the lower right of the slide were provided primarily. One was from Denver Water. That's the one where it shows a billboard where it shows water leaking up through the pipe. It says broken sprinklers, wastewater. And then the other one is just another outlet, if you will, or another way of saving water. It says don't let your toilets run. And obviously a person's tackling a toilet. So these are some of the PR public relation, information that's been going out from water providers to try to get a handle on water efficiency. Efficiency is improved over the last 25 years, primarily indoors. And this is a result of the low flow toilets, water fixtures, that water conservancy water fixtures. And we expect that efficiency to continue through 2050. As new development comes on board, there are regulations to put in low flow toilets, to put in water conservation fixtures. We see that flattening, this water efficiency flattening demand projections. We don't see the straight rise of water use up through 2050. We see it flattening as a result of these water efficiencies. And primarily some of the main ways of looking at water efficiency recently is higher block rates, which means you pay more for the more you use. And then a lot of municipalities are really getting on top of leak detection. Those are the some of the main ways of water efficiency going forward.
Great. And before we transition, one other question: municipal buildings and city and county buildings for water use, are those included in these use category percentage estimates? Would they differ?
Yeah, they are included in the commercial industrial use. What that's meant by commercial industrial use is it's really, office space, counties, people working in offices, this type of thing, so it's included in there. So the only thing that was carved out was the irrigation supply.
Great, thank you.
Great, and now we're going to transition to an element of supply and demand we've been looking at, and Bill touched on it already, but it relates to landscaping, that being residential, that being municipal or civic, or that being commercial, such as an employer. So something we've been looking at is the effect that landscaping currently has on demand, but really looking out over the next 26 years. What is the effect that adjustments, changes, kind of evolutions to typical landscaping could have on the demand of our supply? So, Ann, if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as Bill noted, irrigation does have a notable effect on residential and commercial demand. It's a notable percent. On those land use categories that he cited about 4 slides previous, it really is a notable percentage of that demand. Not surprisingly, between the months of April and October, primarily when temperatures start to warm up and the days are longer, you do see substantial increases on that seasonal basis. And we ask ourselves, really what are the contributing factors to that? Here we are in Arapahoe County. It is a semi-arid high desert climate. So that is a underlying factor that we all coexist with. And then rising average temperatures. The headlines are pretty common nowadays, and it's not just exclusive to Colorado, but that average temperatures are rising, and you see increased frequency of extended, what they're calling extreme heat events, and all that has quite an effect on landscaping and the need for irrigation to keep that landscaping either healthy or in some cases thriving. And at the right here in this photo is a picture of a residential front lawn, including Kentucky bluegrass. And that's an example, just one of a non-native water-intensive species that does require more water than a plant or a type of grass that is native to a high desert climate. Next slide, please, Ann. So adapting to the context, when we think about our climate as it naturally exists, and we think about the increased frequency of those warm days in the 90s exceeding 100, what are the provisions or requirements that Arapahoe counties and cities within Arapahoe County are considering in their municipal codes related to landscaping to adapt to this concept? Part of what I've been doing under this project is looking at different provisions within these codes to say, okay, what are the codes saying in relation to sprinkler systems, to types of plants, to the amount of plant area that can be on properties as proposed in landscape plans. So the majority of jurisdictions in the county do have either requirements or recommendations to either mandate that landscape plans or recommend that landscape plans consider types of landscaping that will have a reduced effect on water supply. These are in the forms of the amount or types of turf that can be used, design requirements for sprinkler or irrigation systems that are used. You may have heard of these, but water sense or smart irrigation controls, so that a sprinkler system is not running full throttle, for example, right after a rain event. And to reduce the effects of water runoff from those irrigation systems, posing limitations on the types of plants on slopes exceeding 25%, for example. Next slide, Ann. And then the look ahead and thinking about, through 2025 and the potential effects for reduced irrigation demand. We have found that there are, when you think about existing uses, whether it be homes, a civic building, a commercial office building, we expect that based on the availability of drought-tolerant landscaping, xeriscaping, education around this topic, very importantly, the price of water, that there is going to be some voluntary conversion to water-wise landscaping on a percentage of properties throughout Arapahoe County. But where we expect to see greater reductions is in communities or jurisdictions, Arapahoe County included, where there are landscape plan requirements that say, okay, this is the amount of coverage, these are the types of plants, this is the type of irrigation system that must be considered. And then putting that all together, we are developing a memo with what the estimated demand reductions would be through 2050 for both that residential and commercial uses, and really looking at model code provisions, recommendations, programs, and best practices that we're going to roll up and include in our final study so that the county and municipal jurisdictions kind of have a roadmap looking to 2050 to clearly understand how landscaping can play an important role. Next slide, please. Okay, we have another question here, and in reference to the types of landscaping I just kind of walked you through. In relation to your residents, or if that's not appropriate for you, or you'd rather respond in relation to where you work, would you consider water-wise landscaping at your property between now and 2050? 100% thus far. Not even a maybe.
We have one maybe in the chat.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. And Ann, are you able to see how many people responded? I know it's 91%, but quantitatively, how many people responded yes?
I don't have that screen pulled up yet, but I will know at the end of this.
Okay, that's okay. No rush there. Yeah, but I'm not surprising to see this. I think when, you know, a driving factor, as I said, is cost of water. It is more than likely going to increase in part just because of inflation, but in part based on supply and the systems required for delivery. So I'm not at all surprised to see that more people than less would be considering this. Okay, and Mary and Rudy, you were indicating I did not get the question presented on my phone. So the question is, if you'd like to respond to it in the chat, is would you consider water-wise or water-smart landscaping at your property between now and 2050? So Ann, let's transition on to the next slide, please. Okay, so potential strategies. Ann is going to give you a quick demonstration of the MetroQuest community engagement and conversation tool that Will mentioned early on in the conversation. But in that, we have identified a series of potential strategies for managing supply in the years to come. These are across 4 categories. And what we would like to do, and we'll give you a quick demonstration, is to provide your input when you're able to access the tool on demand and land use considerations, water efficiency, water reuse, and overall system efficiencies. So that's just a primer. You don't need to do anything in relation to this right now, but I just wanted to tee that up for you so you were aware. Okay, next slide, please. And then water reuse is going to play. It already is playing, I should say, and it will continue to play an important role in our management and stewardship of supply through 2050. And kind of tools or methods at our disposal that only seem to be advancing in their sophistication are exchanges, or essentially water banking. And putting water into a proverbial bank so that in times when there are water shortages, there are supplies available. If you haven't seen them, purple pipes, which is kind of signifies recycled water systems, and water of different, or in some cases, a lower quality than potable drinking water, can be used for things like irrigating agricultural lands, or perhaps irrigation of civic uses such as a golf course. And then both indirect as well as direct potable uses. And there are a couple examples provided at the bottom of the slide. If you care to look either of those up, they're pretty inspirational as to how water is being used. So this is all really to say that, you know, reuse, just like landscaping and irrigation, is going to play an important role and be an important set of tools in the toolbox going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, and I think this is you, correct?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so before we look at that, I just wanted to note that we do have a couple additional questions we haven't responded to in the chat. And we are getting close to our scheduled time, which I'm happy to continue on a little later, but let's go back. Where are we here to these? So one question was about the growth in Bennett, Strasburg, and Deer Trail, and wanting to understand how that is playing into the water supply and growth projections, with concerns that the growth will be extensive and water supply won't be adequate. If I'm summarizing that, not exact words. But Bill or Will?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Well, with the town of Bennett, we looked at really how Bennett is growing in Arapahoe County. A bulk of Bennett is in Adams County. And that is where we see north of I-70 where a lot of the growth and things are occurring. That's where a lot of their water rights are. But as it relates to Arapahoe County, we did not see a lot of growth heading south into Arapahoe County from Bennett, based upon state demographer data. And that's the same with Byers, Strasburg, and Deer Trail. They also did not show with state demographer data the increase in population that we were that are large. And we also looked at DWR data and each of the respective water providers on their existing water supply and water rights, and every single one of them had significantly more water than what was anticipated for growth. I don't know about schools, but I definitely know from water there's enough water in their water rights for the anticipated growth.
Great. The next one was, oh, go ahead. If someone was going to talk, I didn't mean to cut you off. Feel free to share your thought. Okay. So the next comment was about artificial grass and if the county would consider that in other locations. I think it's definitely a strategy to explore. I don't know if anyone has information on that tonight to respond to that question of if the county would embrace artificial grass in other locations.
Larry, are you aware of anything either on the books or potentially coming through the upcoming code revisions that speak specifically to that?
I'm not aware. I'm not sure
Okay.
we've addressed that. I know we've looked at not using growing products in our medians, and that might be a location where our artificial turf would be better than just pouring concrete there.
Okay.
And I do want to acknowledge the time at 7:01. If anyone needs to drop, we understand. We appreciate, though, if you want to stay on, we're happy to stay and answer additional questions for a bit longer so that we can make sure we respond to these. So, but we understand if you have to go. All right, so the next one from Joe was about water authorities. Are they going to more aggressively directly pursue HOAs and their management companies to reduce the lawn square footage requirements of developments and more extensionally educate residents to promote xeriscape? Not just recommendations, but requirements. So for this one, I think this is a good kind of segue to MetroQuest, because those decisions have not been made and generally don't come from water authorities, but from the jurisdiction in the regulations and how they're structured and how they are enforced. And that's something that we're exploring through this process, is how to structure those, what strength they should be for both existing and future development, and where the line should be drawn in those. And I don't know if anyone wanted to add to that response.
And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find that in the chat.
It's a ways up there.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
It's
Thank
from
you.
Joe. 653.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, let me have a quick look here, but I don't want that to hold you up on your demo.
Okay. All right, I will pull that up. We do have still a couple more questions in the chat. We wanted to make sure to share this with everyone. This is the interactive opportunity for input that's available right now. So each of these sliders provides some information. The first one here being things related to just an overview. The second slider provides a more traditional survey in different areas. So relationship to water, quality and supply, water recycling, water saving preferences, and water-wise landscape. So a lot of different options there. We then have priority ranking. So you can go ahead and choose different categories and pull your top priorities above the line. And then something based on the questions I think might be interesting is the strategies section, which allows you to go in, talk about strategies. And if you have additional opinions, these bubbles allow you to comment on them. So we'd love to hear more information about what you're thinking. So things like, you know, requirements and strengthening those things would be great input here. So we will follow up with all the participants with the link, and I can put it in the chat now. But lots of different ways to provide input here. And I don't want to take too much time showing that. So let's go back to questions that we have here.
So, Anne, I wanted to chime in on Joe's question. And Joe, thank you for that. And just to clarify, you're asking, are the water authorities going to more aggressively? The entity that would be relevant here in terms of increasing regulations would be the county, for example, and the incorporated cities that have those landscape plan provisions and requirements. So we are seeing when we did our scan, the majority of them do in fact have requirements related to, your question specifically pertains to the lawn square area footage and requirements of developments. The answer is in those instances, yes. Those requirements, if a new landscape plan is submitted to the county or the relevant city, there are specifically requirements related to the amount of, and in many cases, type of lawn that can be put in place. Specifically, whether they would be pursuing that in the context of the HOAs, I am less sure of that. I think in some instances there are, but I'm not sure it is specifically focused on HOAs. And let me know if that did not sufficiently answer your question, and I will do some additional research for you.
And I would just add there, the water providers are the avenue for such programs as turf replacement, you know, where they're paying folks to remove their turf and replace it with xeriscaping.
Yes.
There's a state program that goes through water providers to do things like that. So I think there's gonna be more of that in the future as well, where water providers will be working closely with the counties and municipalities.
Yeah. Yeah. And Joe, you also asked about education in your question, and yeah, building on what Will said, that education would come from both the municipalities as well as the suppliers. So the answer to that is a definite yes.
All right, we have another question on this study focusing on Arapahoe County and taking too much water out of the aquifers. I'm sorry, I missed. This study focuses on Arapahoe County and makes it to appear that taking too much water out of the aquifers in Adams County will not affect Arapahoe County. The aquifers are the aquifers, and they do not have dams or barriers that stop one county from drawing the aquifers down in another county. Anyone speak to the supply across county boundaries?
Yeah, the aquifers are obviously a regional asset, and so it's not just Arapahoe County that's focused on sustainable use of the aquifers. I know Adams County is preparing to do water master plan as well. And so I think it's really, across the region, folks are focused on this and looking to take action to extend the life of the aquifers.
All right. I think we've responded to these other ones. Go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Joe's comment. Joe, if you can let me know specifically what jurisdiction your comment is germane to, I can provide you with some, I can probably provide you with some additional, more specific resources. Copperleaf. Okay, that sounds like the name of a development. Am I correct? Yeah. Okay.
Kent
And-
Copperleaf is in unincorporated Arapahoe County.
Thank you very much, Larry. Okay. Then Joe, yes, I can follow up with you. I'm actually, I will stop talking and more effectively put a response that I provided to Zoe in the chat right now. There's a series of draft code revisions coming up for the county, and you can request a copy from the county planner who is working on this, Joe. So I would recommend you do that.
There's another question. Will the study identify the water supply gap, either collectively or by individual water providers, to enable the county as a whole to achieve a 75% reduction in reliance on Denver basin supplies on an annual basis?
Yeah, the study's looking at water providers individually and how what the water gap would be there, and also evaluating what other renewable supplies are and can be available to the county as we move forward to reduce that reliance on Denver basin groundwater.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that 75% threshold there, but reduction as an overall theme is certainly part of this.
Yes.
Right. Oh, thanks, Zoe. Yeah, I'm trying to keep up with your everyone's chat questions. Zoe asked if golf courses and public parks are being considered specifically as a place to significantly reduce irrigation.
Yes.
I think that was also locations where we're considering water reuse as an option as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Going back up, Kathy wrote that I reviewed my water usage for the past year, and there's only 2 months where my water usage rises, July and August, for watering my lawn. I seem to use more than my neighbors, so I think we are doing our part. It seems that residents are pinpointed more than other entities in usage.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think when you think about the most available publicly facing kind of campaigns, information, education, it does seem to be targeted most frequently at residents, as opposed to maybe commercial office building owners. But caveat offer, probably not exclusively, but yeah, I think that's a fair observation. And I want to commend you on what you're seeing in terms of your use trends. That's great.
If I've missed anyone's question or you feel like it needs a follow-up, please feel free to unmute or put it back in the chat. So that we can address it. Topsoil conservation. I don't think we talked about this. So Zoe was curious about how the county could encourage topsoil conservation to help absorb rain better instead of removing vegetation and causing erosion. I think that topsoil is a bit beyond, or maybe just more specific than the scope of what we've discussed so far. Certainly we've talked about landscaping requirements, but topsoil conservation hasn't come up specifically in what we've talked about so far. So I think it's an interesting strategy for us to think about going forward that we can work in. But if anybody else has more thoughts on that?
So Ann, I asked Zoe to get in touch with Molly to request a copy of the draft, so she would have the chance to provide that comment and the context of the draft once the code revisions are out.
Great.
So she could start a dialogue directly with Molly.
Excellent. All right. My community is suffering from lack of water. We're all on domestic wells. We are currently considering bringing in a water provider. Another option is to drill several community wells. The concern is the actual availability in the Denver Basin. What is the life expectancy of the Denver Basin?
Well, that's a very interesting question. You know, there's confusion, I think, with people indicating there's a 100-year aquifer life. Well, that's really not the truth. It's the aquifer is very regional, as Will indicated, and the water is allocated 100 years. A lot of the issues that I've seen in communities that are suffering from water that have domestic wells, that these wells are in the shallower water aquifers, i.e. the Denver. But there are deeper aquifer below the property, whether it be the Arapahoe or the Fox Hills, that there is water available, but it's obviously economically challenging to possibly get there and drill those wells. So we're looking into that as well on the domestic wells. Some of the information that I've seen in the past is older wells were maybe not completed to the base of the aquifer, where pumps are set, these types of issues. That we're looking into as well for various wells across the county to see actually how wells were constructed, to see if they're actually in the drilled all over the base of the aquifer.
This study doesn't speak. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say that you know, there's a comment that the Fox Hills water is not good drinking water. It varies across the county. There can be pockets that it's not great, just to natural deposition. But the city of Bennett or the town of Bennett is primarily on Larry Fox Hills water. So it's in certain parts of the county, you know, there's obviously really good water in the Fox Hills.
Okay.
And then there's another question that came in. Do you monitor the numbers of water usage by oil and gas companies, i.e. fracking? Yes, we do. Bottom line is in Arapahoe County, virtually no water from Arapahoe County is used for fracking. All the water, or the major fracking, is used by water coming in from the South Platte. The big producer, that oil and gas producer that is in the region or in the area, is Civitas, and they bring water in from Bar Lake, which is way up north through 2 major pipelines. Very little water. Besides, there is some water that's being used by Rangeview for oil and gas, but it's not a significant amount. Does Adams County monitor the water use by oil and gas? Yes, they do. And very little is coming from the Denver Basin and the main Denver Basin aquifers. And the main reason is the Denver Basin aquifers just do not produce a volume of water in a rate that is, you know, basically sufficient for oil and gas. They really do need, you know, surface water. They need pipelines and reservoirs to be able to get the water they need to the community.
All right.
And
yep.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead with your thought.
Someone had just posted, how would our community determine if drilling multiple wells would be better than bringing in a water provider?
That would be a good question to basically look at the individual circumstance of the community, what water is available beneath it, you know, what the costs are associated with drilling in a community well. There was also issues with trying to make sure that you know, the water quality is meeting drinking water standards consistent with the Colorado Department of Public Health and the environment. But typically, those are some of the issues that come available when you're doing a community style well.
That'd be an engineering analysis to compare options, I think.
And then there was a question, isn't Rangeview drawing water from the Denver aquifer? No, they're not. Most of their water is coming in from the Wise pipeline, which brings water in from the South Platte. They bring water down through that pipeline and then route it up to their development at Sky Ranch. They do have, Rangeview does manage the groundwater associated with the state land board of the Lower Bombing Range, but they don't use a ton of that Denver Basin groundwater. Very limited use there. And they do have a little bit of Denver Basin groundwater up to Skyview Ranch, or at the Sky Ranch. But again, primarily most of the water is coming in from the Wise pipeline, which is the South Metro pipeline through ECCV and ACWWA.
Hey, Will, can you see Kelly's question? Are you best suited to answer that?
You know, I'm not able to see any of the questions for some reason. So if you want to read that to me.
I can answer that question too, Kelly, that yes, there is discussions of new reservoirs and expansion of reservoirs in Region 2. There is some thinking, you know, with both the two large entities that are looking at putting in developments, being Rangeview and Prosper Farms, of doing more of that surface water and renewable water. There are discussions of using renewable water in the Box Elder Creek through augmentation, and again, putting in more reservoir storage, you know, east of the Aurora Reservoir, to anticipate and help with growth in the, I guess, the central part of the county.
And that's also a question in the MetroQuest survey as well, that you can provide input on too. Maybe one of our latest questions here is about groundwater pollution in unincorporated Arapahoe County, which is fed by surface water, which picks up large amounts of chemical runoff during flood events, enters our streams, creeks. How is this being measured? Are you looking at options for public education regulations specific to quality?
As a general answer, yes, but the bottom line is, with a lot of the Denver Basin water that's being used in the unincorporated area, it's the deeper water, the Arapahoe, Denver, Fox Hills, which is not directly tied to the surface streams. It is separate than that. So that drinking water source is fairly well protected from surface water contamination. And really in Region 2 and not much in Region 3, there's really not much surface water that flows anyway. Flood events excluded for sure, but that's why those two areas are in a designated basin.
And Zoe, just a minor point about clarification of the scope of the study. It's certainly not exclusive of the quality that Ann referred to, but this is more of a study that's focused on long-term quantity of the asset and the resource.
Right, seems that our questions are ending potentially. Will, do you want to wrap us up?
Sure. I think we had one or two more slides there.
Oh.
Okay, for next steps, we really appreciate everyone joining us tonight. And through this water supply study, we will be developing some policy recommendations and bringing those forward for consideration in the spring, going through the public meeting process. And then we'll have another public meeting in March, probably an in-person meeting, but stay tuned for that. And then we'll be looking to draft and finalize the report in the May-June timeframe, and finalizing the report and making it accessible for folks to be able to review. So our Q&A, we appreciate everybody's questions this evening, and hopefully we gave you some good answers there. And if you have any other questions, you'll be able to certainly ping us through the MetroQuest tool. And we thank you for joining us. Here's contact information for Larry and Loretta, our co-project managers, and my contact info as well. So with that, we wish everybody a nice evening, and thanks again for joining us.
Will, I'm sorry, if I may, Will,
Yes, sir.
just a final question. Kelly was asking if the presentation would be available on the project webpage or elsewhere.
Yes, it will be on the project webpage. We're hoping to get that up tomorrow, so that everybody has access to it.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.